Hi everyone, my name is Courtney and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm back to do a monthly wrap-up. So I kind of took a little bit of time off last month, just was busy, wasn't feeling it, was tired, needed a break, and that might continue into the next month, but I will be back for wrap-ups, but just kind of letting some ideas simmer on things before I come back fully. I've never been good at planning videos, so when burnout happens, it hits me pretty good on YouTube just because I don't have anything prepared. But monthly wrap-ups are something that's always easy to include just because a standardized thing. I read some books, let's talk about them. And I did end up reading a lot of books this month, surprisingly. There's a couple reasons. I read at work, of course, because it is something that is a really great way to pass my time while I do my busy work at work, so I just need an audiobook going. And the other reason is because I'm kind of doing a small project on TikTok, or I kind of started a small project on TikTok, and that's basically just trying to get through my TBR list, and I just did it as a couple TikTok videos. I might continue it in the future. I've been reading my TBR, trying to get it finished before the end of the year, and just kind of including it in some TikTok content. But let's be real, 90% of my brain is still Good Omens. But surprisingly, despite that fact, I did end up reading a lot. So let's actually discuss what I read. So I did read a ton of manga this month, so let us start there. Again, this is finishing up things that I own. So I continued with Haikyuu, finishing up volume 20 and 21. So now I am completed on this particular arc of the story. So next up for me is Nationals, but I'm not going to continue reading Haikyuu until I get more volumes. So that's going to be something for next year's Courtney to worry about. And besides that, I was just reading random volumes, just trying to finish up the other manga series I have, so that all I have left is Haikyuu and Kami-sama Kiss. So to do that, I read Yona the Dawn, shoujo fantasy princess that has to flee her kingdom, my favorite series probably. I continued with Apothecary Diaries, which is Cian, girl who lives in the fancy Chinese court and has to solve little mysteries and is very much into apothecary work. And then the other two volumes I read are Kimi no Todoke, which is kind of like a nostalgia shoujo romance series for me. I'm tentatively thinking about collecting it. I had the first 5 volumes that I just saw randomly at the bookstore and decided to pick up in like March of this year, so just finally getting around to reading this series. And yeah, I'm really liking my reread of this series. I've watched this anime several times. I have read the manga all the way through, so this is something I'm thinking tentatively about collecting in the future. But yes, those are all the manga I read this month. So let's first cover a graphic novel. So I read The Princess and the Grilled Cheese by Daya Munzin. This is a standalone graphic novel. I believe it is a young adult graphic novel, and it is following a young woman who has to dress up and pretend to be a boy to kind of get away with not getting married after his father passes away so that he can retain his land and title and all of that without having to get married. Chaos ensues because he gets involved in court life and he gets attached to the princess, and things get really complicated as she is not who she says she is. Liked this. I didn't love it. This was one of the books that I read for that TikTok series, and I talk a little bit about it. Like, I love the art style, I love the character designs, I like the characterization. I also really like the tone. It's kind of quirky, goofy, a little over the top, very cheesy, which fits really well because this entire book is just cheese puns. All of the characters have cheese names. They make grilled cheese sandwiches. It's just like a lot of funny things like that, and it's like pseudo-regency, pseudo-fairy tale-esque setting, but there's like technology and stuff, so there's a lot of weird moving parts in this. Are both charming and also didn't quite mesh together for me. But the big thing for this book is that it just needed to be a little bit of a chunkier graphic novel. It's really short. We're getting a lot of stuff really quickly, a lot of story, get all these quirky moving parts to fit together again. I felt like we needed just more of it. I liked this. It was a good, sweet, cute time, but I didn't love it. So like 3 out of 5 stars. And now we can get into the novels that I read, which I think all of them were novels that I read at work as audiobooks. Yeah, I don't know when I'm gonna get back to like actual physical reading. Eventually, sooner rather than later, but it's just how my life is right now. But anyway, I read 2 novels that kind of go together, and I say that just because they're both adult queer romances. I don't want to talk too much about about Queerly Beloved because I am saving it for a video thing that I'm doing. But basically the gist of this is that our main character is part-time a closeted baker who works at a very Christian conservative bakery, and then her other life is that she works at a queer bar and that she is a lesbian, and her life is kind of thrown into chaos when she meets this new person that comes into town. She lives in like a small conservative rural kind of town. She lives in Tulsa, so like not small town, but like, you know, like rural city. And after that instance of kind of falling head over heels for this new girl in town, she gets fired from her place of work and has to start on this crazy adventure of becoming a bridesmaid for hire. It's a very quirky story. There's a lot going on, but I absolutely adored this. Our main character, Amy, is just so fun and spunky, and she gets herself into a lot of trouble, but it's really enjoyable to watch. This story is definitely Amy's story. It's really about her having this like chaotic moment in her life and dealing with a lot of things and coming to terms with stuff and growing and changing and figuring out what she wants to do. It's just really, really fun to follow, but because of that, the romance is a little bit more back burner, but I still really liked it. It was still really cute in the beginning. But overall, if you are like me and are a big fan of like really messy queer romance stories, really coming into their own quarter life crisis kind of queer stories, like this is going to be for you. I really loved the emphasis on queer community, discussions of queer community. There were elder gays in here, like a supportive queer community. Has a lot of the tropes that I really like. Really enjoyed this. Again, can't wait to talk about it more in a future video. And along with that, I also read Rosalind Palmer Takes the Cake, which is like very similar vibes to Queerly Beloved in that it is a quarter life crisis romance story about a girl who's basically just going through it. Alexis Hall is like a very well-known queer British author, and so I've always wanted to read their work, but I just haven't gotten to it. This ended up just being the first one that I picked up. It is about a bisexual main character, but both of the love interests are male. There's like a lot of discussions of the bi community, what it means to be bi, how it feels to be bi in the community, and a lot of other good stuff about Rosalind just like making the wrong decision and doing the wrong thing. The other thing is that this book is very, very British. Like, yes, it takes place on a film set that is basically Great British Bake Off, and like, yes, it is set in England and the characters are British, but like, I don't know. I've read other books that are written by British people, but just felt really, really British, but like in an enjoyable way. But like, I don't know, just reading as an American, I was just like, oh my god, this is really British. But again, I really liked it. Rosalind is like very peppy, high energy, very much a people pleaser, getting into just like a lot of really chaotic situations. A lot of this was a lot of secondhand embarrassment, if I'm being completely honest. I was really like, oh my god, facepalm. But again, if you're really into like that chaotic, the trope of the disaster by main character, like, you're gonna love this. It was a lot of fun, really cute and sweet. This wasn't initially on my radar, but I wanted to read the second novel, which is a companion. I don't think you have to read this first one to read the second one, but that's what I ended up doing, and I'm glad I did because I had a lot of fun with it. It was really cute, really sweet. If Queerly Beloved is like a 4-star, this is like a 3.75 star. Really, really enjoyed it. Had a really good time. Yeah, I'm really just finding my fit with romance, which is it's gotta be queer somehow. It's gotta be like quarter life crisis, characters being messy, doing messy things. That's what I really, really love. I love characters coming into their own a little bit later in life, figuring stuff out. Lots and lots of fun. Taking a step away from the romance novels, I also read The Sun and the Star by Rick Riordan and Mark Oshiro, and this is like a companion to the Percy Jackson series, but if I'm being honest, you kind of have to read every single Percy Jackson book to get to this, which is the Percy Jackson series, the Heroes of Olympus series, and the Trials of Apollo series. Like, you really gotta read all three to read this Nico book. If you don't know, Nico D'Angelo is a very well beloved character in the Percy Jackson world, and so this novel is like his standalone novel of his own adventure, and his boyfriend Will are going into the depths of Tartarus. And because this is like a standalone and not like part of a bigger series and really just like a one and done for Nico, it just felt so different than a lot of other books by Rick Riordan. Very purposely, I think so. It's a very internal story about these characters figuring themselves out and figuring out their relationship and dealing with like kind of first problems in a relationship, and it's really really sweet, really fun. It's definitely got the humor there, but it's a lot of heart, quite not as bouncy as some of the others in the Percy Jackson world, but I think that was very intentional on the part of the author, and I had a lot of fun with this. It was really good to be back in this world. I'm really excited to read Percy's new book because that came out, and I'm excited for the new TV series, of course. But yes, I'm almost caught up on the Percy Jackson world yet again. I'm just always glad to be back here. It's middle grade, it's fun, it's nostalgic, and I love these characters and what Rick is willing to explore and bring into his series every time that he returns to it. And so the final book that I read this month was going to be Moby Dyke, and this is by Krista Burton, and this is a nonfiction all about lesbian bars and the lesbian bar scene, like right after, kind of during the late stages of the pandemic. Basically, after and during the pandemic, there's kind of this outcry about lesbian bars kind of disappearing, and that brought attention to the lesbian bar scene. And then Krista, but a lot of other people have like kind of discussed this issue, like trying to figure out why these bars are leaving, what we can do to support them, lots of stuff. In Krista Burton's book, this is basically just her traveling to the 20 remaining bars, and also discussions of like queer spaces and the queer community and just like her personal life. This was really, really interesting. I just have a very different queer experience than Krista, so this was just really interesting to me. Obviously, she is about 10-15 years older than me, so so she has like a different history than me, like just being an older person, but also like just having grown up really or been in queer spaces since I've come out. And so this was just really interesting to me because I don't have these experiences at all. So very different experience, but really, really interesting, really fascinating, and really engaging. Like I read this via audiobook, and it just really, really engaging. And I can't say that about all nonfiction. I really was interested in reading about all the different bars. It made me interested and want to try them at some point. And it's just so interesting because lesbian bars particularly see themselves as spaces for the entire community. They don't see themselves as like lesbian only spaces. They really see themselves as spaces for everybody and being welcome to every type of person, which has kind of changed the lesbian bar scene apparently. Definitely I recommend picking this book up. It was really, really interesting. Again, I'm not like the biggest nonfiction person. It was just really nice to read a nonfiction that was, one, so engaging and so interesting, but one that I think would be really accessible for a lot of people to read. And I had a good time with that. One last book, because I almost forgot. So the last book that I read this month was Ring Shout by P. Delgy Clark, and this is my new favorite of this month. For sure, this was like a 4.5 out of 5 stars for me. It was just everything that I was looking for. This is a short fantasy / horror / historical novel. So it's got a lot of different moving elements, but basically we are in this historical setting, 1920s, I believe, during Prohibition. Our main characters are a small team of women who take out Ku Kluxes, which are basically these monsters that are born from members of the Ku Klux Klan. And there's like something more sinister going on with that, and like them figuring out this whole thing about why people are turning into these weird monsters, and obviously racism in the Deep South. And there are also a lot of body horror elements, but I loved this. The writing was spectacular, the story was engaging, and for a novella, this was incredibly well paced. Like I cannot think of another story where I felt so engrossed in the characters and so connected to them. They were so fleshed out, and especially our main character was just felt so real, but her story and her journey was so well paced. This novel hit every beat that I would expect in like a 200 to 400 page novel, and it was able to do that in less than 200 pages while still making the character feel really fleshed out, really engaging, and it didn't feel too fast or too slow. Like I don't know how you did this. This was perfect. So yeah, this is definitely the best thing that I read this month, and it's definitely one of the best things that I've read this year. Just really, really excellent. I'm definitely looking forward to reading more from this author because this hit everything that I want a novella to hit, but it also just hit everything that I want from like a sci-fi horror leaning novel. I still have a pretty big TBR stack, but I did get through a big chunk of it this month, so really happy about that. And I'm really, really looking forward to next month to continue my TBR pile, how much I can get done before the end of the year. Right now I'm reading Out There, which is a queer anthology that I've had on my TBR for a little while. But yeah, that's really what I read this month. Just had a really good time. So all in all, this was a really good month. Yeah, I hope you enjoyed. Let me know what you read this month. I would love to know. But thank you so much for watching. I'll see you guys later, and happy reading.